We now continue with Julie Wyman's recollections. She writes, in the next class, Strickland began with, who's going to start us off with a possible approach to schooling? Anybody? It was Carol Pavarone who said, well, I think it's obvious that the basic communication skills need to be taught, reading, writing, and clearly some sort of basic math skills at the very least would be in order. I mean, that's pretty fundamental, wouldn't you all agree? And we did. Then Roger asked the question, why not just leave things basically the way they are now? I'm not sure why we're even having this discussion. Why would it change just because now it's under a cooperative system? Maybe it shouldn't, replied Joe in support. Then Tom added, I feel that early education should be well-rounded, introducing kids to everything, like it does now. This is really, in a way, the same principle and reasoning applied to the rotation system, isn't it? It creates a stronger, more versatile society. Scott then pointed out this distinction. Higher education will most probably be different. If it's like John envisions, where institutions will be formed by students and practitioners of the various arts and disciplines, and these institutes will become the new scholarly meccas of higher learning, then they will probably replace our colleges and universities. Carter then said, the formats are very similar. On many university campuses, a great deal of real-world research, application, and discoveries go on. And many different disciplines may join together on a campus-type environment, much like our current universities. The main difference, it seems to me, will be general public access. Anyone with an interest will be able to freely go and mingle and participate at whatever level they are at, without needing to go through some sort of weeding out application and acceptance process and pay a fee. These institutions won't be competing against each other anymore for students. Then John said, what I envisioned was that people will find their own levels. Much of the learning will be on their own, all by accessing highly sophisticated, well-organized websites that these institutions will update and maintain. Scott said, that would be cool, very futuristic. Patty interjected, and this is where one can go to learn and study these arts and disciplines. Ken said, sign me up. No college debt. Can we implement cooperatism before I have to start paying back this loan? Roger concurred, yeah, I'm liking this part. Carol then got us back on track. The physical institutions themselves would be where students and enthusiasts could congregate face to face with those at a similar level, as well as places to get some hands-on experience. John added, they will also be places where members can build and house any specialized equipment. Milt suggested there might not be just one of these institutions per discipline. There would be as many as people would want to form. So there may be hundreds of, say, physics institutions of various sized memberships spread all across the country, but their databases would all be linked together, learning from each other and inspiring each other, probably very much like blogs and specialized sites work now on the internet. And, added Mike, as Carter said, it might be very much like our universities now, where institutions for various arts and sciences may coexist on some sort of campus layout. Who knows? So, clarified Tracy, I guess we're saying that higher education would be up to the individual and approached freely in a sort of way that it might fit with an individual's interests or personality. But what about the earlier childhood years? Julie then said, I think early education would have to introduce the types of things encountered in the workforce. I mean, clearly this needs to be addressed. The whole system depends on this workforce providing its products and services. Education should adequately prepare everyone for their coming workforce years, giving them an understanding of why these things need to be done and how it benefits society as a whole. It should ground them in the range of skills and knowledge needed to function in all of the various aspects of the workforce. This seems obvious. It will make the rotation system far easier for everyone, and during these years they can discover where their talents and preferences lie. Then Mike said, I'm sort of picturing a lot of field trips exploring and experiencing workforce functions. Speaking of workforce functions, Linda asked, what about teaching? Are teachers going to be in the workforce? Is this going to be a workforce function? Are people going to rotate in and out of being teachers? I'm not sure that sounds very promising. This was a good question. What would be the status of teachers with regard to the workforce? It didn't really seem to fit the doctor, engineer, lawyer groupings we discussed earlier. It didn't seem to be likely that there would be some sort of teachers club or institution where teachers would congregate and explore the theories and advancements in the field of teaching. I suppose that was possible, but it seemed to be an entirely different type of grouping. Mike offered his thoughts on this. Well, like we were saying, a great deal of education would revolve around the workforce and the various skills needed, so maybe each workforce segment has a department that handles hands on training for student groups coming through the facilities. And the personnel in this department could be rotated into and out of that department in accordance with the rotation system. Suppose each electrical power plant facility had a department that handled students coming through at various levels and age groups and had a program that actually instructed them in the various jobs in the plant. The younger kids would get sort of an overview, and the older kids would get more in-depth training and some actual hands-on experience. Through their school years, students would periodically return to the power plant and get educated and trained a bit further. By the time those kids were out of school, they would be, with very little effort, able to seamlessly integrate into the power plant environment, practically fully functioning. Then Tom asked, "Why don't we do this now, in our present system?" Jordan answered, "That type of scenario really doesn't work in our system because we don't predetermine what industry or company a child will ultimately end up working for. They make that choice later, so we have to give them a general education, which, after making their choices, has to be augmented with training more specific to that field or job. In cooperativism, it seems we're saying there will be given workforce segments and functions that each member of society will have to participate in." Scott picked up on this. So now it would be possible to prepare in advance from an early age for these various tasks, and these tasks would not be simply arbitrary. Jason continued, "Students could enter the workforce skilled in the various aspects of the system, allowing them the versatility to move around within a segment or between segments quite easily with just some basic refresher training." He questioned further, "So if this were the case, then much of the actual teaching would be done by the personnel in various departments of each workforce segment. And this would automatically be incorporated into the workforce and the rotation system. This function would not then be handled by someone who is specifically careered as a teacher, but now anyone and everyone is a potential teacher. You only need to be proficient at whatever task needs to be taught. Workers would then be randomly rotated in and out of these instructional positions." "Well," said Tracy, "some of it anyway." Jordan shook his head. "Well, why not?" Tracy questioned. "It's like going on a field trip. On school field trips, a working professional instructs the class on location. They aren't professional teachers. And besides, workforce education and training won't be the only education children get. Like Carol said initially, kids need to be taught the basic communication skills like reading and writing, along with basic math skills. And I'm sure all of us would agree that kids need to be exposed to all the various arts and sciences and academic disciplines that they are now, so they can come out of their school years with a basic understanding of the world. These aspects could still be taught in some sort of classroom setting as it is now." Then Katie said, "There will be all of these various clubs we've been talking about that include everything not included in the workforce. Children could be taken to these clubs or institutions where various members would teach and demonstrate what is involved in practicing these arts, crafts, sciences, and athletic sports. School may evolve into an endless series of field trips." Emma added, "And there won't be the need for so much testing. Let's face it, the purpose of testing now is to evaluate a student's abilities, allowing society to pigeonhole them. It becomes a scorecard whereby they compete with each other for acceptance into higher learning institutions, which then allows them to compete when vying for jobs in the real world. This won't be necessary anymore. What does it matter if a particular child struggles with math or science or history? In our present system, it puts them at a disadvantage in terms of their overall evaluation. But in cooperativism, it won't matter. It only matters that they can function to some capacity in the workforce to contribute their fair share. Beyond that, their lives are theirs, to be lived as they choose. No worries." Jordan then felt the need to question this scenario. But won't this take away people's incentive to improve themselves and their lives? Won't people just do the bare minimum and thereby create a society of loafers and losers? I come back to this human nature thing again. Don't we need to get pushed into making an effort in life? In response, Milt offered, "Well, Jordan, this is the fear many will have when considering this system, but I think it's unfounded. There certainly will be those that will do the bare minimum and skate through life, but again, that happens now in our present system. Yet there are endless examples of self-starters, self-motivators, those with passions and dreams, and those with a desire to accomplish something wonderful in life. Cooperatism puts fewer roadblocks in their way, and because of that, I think that those who become discouraged in the money system will flourish under cooperatism. The percentage of those who accomplish dreams in life will increase. Cooperatism gives people more freedom and lets them utilize more of their life in ways that make them happy and fulfilled. And society benefits because those who were once thwarted and discouraged will find their strength and will be free to contribute in their own ways without the burden of having to make some sort of living at it." There was a pause, and then Katie picked it up again. "This new education system," she began, "could be a lot more flexible in terms of allowing children to concentrate on a subject in which they have a sudden interest, taking advantage of their immediate desire to soak in everything they can about that subject. Each child's path through the educational system could be more individualized instead of competitive. There may be a more lenient mixing of various age groups at different times and different subjects, joining others with similar interests. The only requirement would be periodic exposure and training for the various workforce functions." Then Strickland jumped in and asked, "So what is the answer to the question of whether or not teaching will be a separate category or a segment in the workforce? It sounds like we're saying that much of the teaching will be done by workers in the various segments who may be temporarily assigned teaching duty for those classes of students that come through on a regular basis. Or, in terms of non-workforce categories, it will be arranged with members of these various clubs or institutions that someone will give instruction to these classes, again, on a regular basis. But will there be those who, as a workforce function, are responsible for supervising and organizing these activities? When these students are not involved in one of these field trips, what are they doing? Is the whole education process a series of back-to-back field trips like Katie mentioned? What I'm getting at is, are there some sort of physical school buildings like there are now, where students go and have classroom sessions in addition to the field trip scenarios? And if so, who will manage, facilitate, and teach in these settings? And will this be considered part of the workforce?" "Yes," said Emma. "I think there would have to be some sort of educational segment to the workforce. This is really a necessary part of a modern society." "Maybe not," countered Patty. "Maybe it wouldn't look anything like the current system. Given modern technology, especially in the field of communications, the entire face of education might change. Computers and the internet have made it possible to essentially be educated in anything from home. One well-crafted instructional video can teach an unlimited number of kids a particular topic or skill at any time, eliminating the need for scheduled, real-time, real-world classes and classrooms. In fact, these types of instructional videos are already being used in modern classroom settings. Parents could be directly involved in the education of their children by reviewing and selecting from the various choices of educational videos per subject. For example, there might be, say, 50 top videos instructing children in basic math skills. Different videos may approach the subject differently. Different approaches might be more effective for different children. Parents can read reviews of other parents have written on the various approaches and then choose ones that they feel will be most effective for their child. They can watch the videos with their children and be there to answer questions. And then, seeing where their child may be confused, choose another video that may utilize a different approach to a problem area." Sarah interjected, Parents could access the schedules for the various field trips online and either accompany their children or set up a group of neighborhood kids to attend these sessions under the supervision of several parents. And parent schedules would be far freer and more flexible in a cooperative workforce setting, allowing them to easily schedule these outings. The possibilities are endless, and with libraries and educational videos online, there would be no need to have teaching specifically included in the workforce segments. There would also be no real need for school buildings anymore. The whole educational process could be handled by the parents or parent groups. Or maybe school buildings would still be utilized to bring large groups of kids together for various extracurricular activities, giving them a chance to develop social skills. Then Linda said there would not be any lack of educational videos. I don't think making them would need to be a workforce function. Look at how many people are making instructional videos now and putting them on the internet for free, even in a money-driven society. Then Scott pointed out, if we eliminate the category of teachers from Milt's Occupational Outlook Handbook figures, then that eliminates almost another 7 million workers from the workforce, according to our chart. That means we can shave another hour off the typical work week, reducing it from 27 to 26. Jordan cautioned, "You're assuming everyone between 25 and 45 will be working. I think you'll agree that might be unrealistic. Within that segment of the population, there will be a certain percentage that for some reason will not be able to work due to some maybe physical or mental disability." We all had to admit this was true. Then Milt said, "All right, fair enough. Let's say that 80% of that segment can work. I think that's more than fair. Would you agree, Jordan?" Jordan shrugged and nodded his consent. "Okay," continued Milt. "Let's plug 80% into the spreadsheet and see what comes up." He made the appropriate adjustments and then clicked enter. "There," he said, "rounded to the nearest whole number, everyone in the workforce would have to work a 32-hour work week. That's 4 8-hour days with an automatic 3-day weekend. That would be the worst case scenario. And if you think about it, there will be a certain percentage of retirees who, for whatever reason, will volunteer time back into the workforce. You know this is true. It even happens in our current system. Even after a lifetime of working 40-hour weeks, people want to feel needed and useful. Or maybe they love farming or mechanical work, or they just enjoy being part of the working class, the camaraderie, working with and building relationships with the younger generations, whatever. You just know it'll happen. And depending on how many of them there are and how much time they wish to donate, that 32-hour work week might decrease. I can think of situations where a retired parent or a retired grandparent might volunteer time back into the workforce for a son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter to take some sort of extended leave for whatever reason. Since everyone in the population is trained in the workforce functions, these types of substitutions would be easy. A retiree would be a sought-after valuable commodity. They are trained and have at least 20 years of experience, and for the most part are still relatively young. That's the kind of versatility in the workforce that this type of system offers, a tremendous advantage over our specialized, inflexible workforce, where the older generations are pushed out to make room for the young. Then Strickland posed the question, what about land ownership? How might that be handled in the new system? Property ownership is handled in a money system by purchasing power. Since this new system eliminates purchasing or buying altogether, then how do we resolve property ownership? And by property, I'm specifically referring to land as opposed to objects. I think based on our discussion so far, we can all agree that object ownership is fairly straightforward. If you've made something or are given something, then you can claim ownership. But with land, it isn't that simple. Think about that for next class. Good work today. Really excellent ideas on how the whole educational system might look. Really interesting. Much food for thought. To summarize, children would be educated and trained in all the various workforce tasks. There would be a great deal of actual hands-on experience taking the classroom to the workplace. Current workers in the field would guide students through the basics of how the different skills are performed, and as they get closer to actually entering the workforce themselves, students would receive more in-depth training. He continued, this practical approach to education would allow individuals to enter the workforce trained and experienced, ready to be utilized whenever the need arose. Children would discover where their talents and interests lie and give them an obvious purpose and reason for learning what they learn. It will become evident at a very early age that maintaining these workforce tasks is in their personal best interest. During their younger years, children would be introduced to and encouraged to try all of the intellectual disciplines, arts, and sciences, giving them opportunities to discover their passions. They would not be tied to the same agenda as their peers. They could explore and indulge in different fields of interests as their individual interest in those fields peaks. Physical schools could be augmented or even replaced by online learning, allowing for more flexible learning schedules and agendas, placing the responsibility more on the parents as to the structure of a child's education. Remember, next class, land ownership.